Okay, last video, page 131 is the one we're doing this time. So let's dig in. So on page 131, I think the big deal here is just to get you guys to be doing sine, cosine, and tangent ratios without a triangle, I guess. You kind of have to draw your own triangle. So if we read through, this is number one. This is just part A, obviously. But it says we've got this right triangle, and the sides are GH at 40, HJ at 32, and JG at 24. So just draw yourself. Oh, I don't know how to do this. Oh, yes, I do. All right, I was going to say that I didn't know who the right angle is, right? They don't tell us which one is the right angle. But obviously, as many of you kids have said in class, the hypotenuse is always the longest side. So looking at these numbers, the longest side is 40. And that means that's the one that has to be named GH. So you know that G is at one end and H is at the other end. It doesn't matter which end is which, really, unless if you really want my picture to be drawn to scale, then the shortest side, 24, would go here. And I kind of got lucky, I guess. 24 has G in it, so this would have to be G. So I got lucky and I named it correctly so that my sides are in the right order. But then the 32 could go down here. And there's the H for HJ. The 24 is JG. So obviously we can now figure out that J must be our right angle. And now that everything's drawn correctly, the rest is kind of a piece of cake. So that's the reason that they didn't even tell us what the angles were. They wanted us to figure out who were the two acute angles. And we see one of them is G. So we want to do the sine of angle G and the cosine of angle G and the tangent of angle G. And then the other angle is angle H. And we want to be doing the sine of angle H and the cosine of angle H and the tangent of angle H. But again, all of these answers are just going to be fractions once again. And if sine is the one we're doing, then we want opposite over hypotenuse. It would be 32 over 40. Just make sure you're always reducing your fractions. So what's 32 and 40 divisible by? Well, they're both divisible by 8. So if you can spot that they're both divisible by 8, you can get done really fast, because dividing by 8 gives you 4 over 5. If you did not spot that you could divide by 8, then you should at least notice that they're both even and divisible by 2. So you'd get to 16 over 20. And then you should notice that those are still both divisible by 2. You might notice they're divisible by 4 and then get directly to the 4 over 5. But you should at least notice they're divisible by 2, and then you get 8 over 10, at which point you should still notice that you can still divide by 2. And so even if it takes you a bunch of steps, you should be able to get to a 4/5 for me and give me that answer. Don't give me anything but 4/5. I need a totally reduced answer. Okay? So we'll do the same thing now for the cosine of G. It's going to be 24 over 40 this time because it's adjacent over hypotenuse. And these numbers are again divisible by 8, but this time giving 3 over 5. And then the tangent of G, if we're using G, then opposite over adjacent would be the 32 over 24, which are both divisible by 8, giving me 4 over 3. And then we can use our tricks to find the rest. We saw on some of the other homework assignments that sine and cosine just switch. The sine becomes the cosine and the cosine becomes, the sine. So the 3/5 that was cosine will now be our sine. It goes up there and becomes 3/5. The 4/5 that used to be sine is now our cosine. And what happens with tangent is tangent flips over and becomes the reciprocal. So instead of 4 over 3, it's 3 over 4. But there's all 6 of your trig functions. And then we do the same thing for the next one. I assume it's very similar. Yeah, they're giving us 3 measurements. So we would need to draw ourselves a triangle. And if I've got a side of 60 and a side of 61 and then a side of 11, it must mean there's one side that's really short. So there's my 11. Then this is 61, and then this guy down here is 60. So there, that drawing is pretty decent, pretty well drawn to scale. Now which side is which? Well, the 61 has to be AC, and 11 also has A in its name. The 61 and the 11 both have A in their name, so the point they share must be point A. Then the 60 and the 61 both have C in their name, so 60 and 61 must share point C, and that means the right angle must be angle B. So there's ABC. I'm correctly labeled. All the numbers are there. So now the rest is a piece of cake. My two acute angles are A and C. So we want the sine of angle A, sine of angle A, angle A, sine of angle C, cosine of angle C, tangent of angle C. And then all of these fractions, sine of A, if you're looking at A, then opposite over hypotenuse would be 60 over 61. And cosine of A would be 11 over 61. And tangent of A would be 60 over 11. And then if we switch gears and we start to look at angle C, then the sine of angle C would be opposite, which is 11, over hypotenuse, which is 61. And cosine would be adjacent over hypotenuse, so 60 over 61. And the tangent would be 11 over 60. But that's it. That's all your trig ratios. Okay, now this. So to solve these problems, then again, what you have to do is draw a triangle. So just draw whatever. Just draw any old right triangle. And if you're not worried about it being drawn to scale, then you can pick either angle to be A. I'm going to go ahead and let this one up here be A. And they're also asking me about B, so that means this guy down here must be B. And the right angle is whatever. I guess it's probably C, right? But nobody's asking about C. We just want to do A and B, and that's it. So what do we know? They told us that cosine was 24 over 25. And you know that cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. So by telling us the cosine of A was 24 over 25, they're basically telling us that the hypotenuse is 25. So I know that that side right there is 25 for sure. Now I also know that the side adjacent to A is 24. So it's not the opposite side. It's the adjacent one. It's this vertical one. This is 24. Now that means we do not know what this side is right here. By the way, my picture is drastically not drawn to scale because this side, it's going to turn out to just be 7. So it should be way shorter than the 24, but forgive me, I'm not going to redraw it or anything. But how do I know it's 7? Well, I know it's 7 because I know the Pythagorean theorem. If I was trying to solve for what this mystery side was, I'd mark it as x, and I would know that my leg squared, x squared, plus my other leg squared, 24 squared, has to equal my hypotenuse squared, which is 25 squared. So that's an x squared that equals, I don't know what these numbers are, and it doesn't equal anyway. It's x squared plus. It's like 600 or something. What's 24 squared? Let me bring the calculator back. Here's the calculator. 24 squared is 576, and 25 squared is 625. Come on, do it. There you go, 625. So if we're doing this math, then we're getting, I cannot read that, 576. Equals 625. So to get x alone, you better subtract 576 from both sides, which would cause this to cancel, leaving me with just x squared. And if I do this subtraction, I'm left with 49. And then, of course, to solve for plain old x, you take the square root of both sides, and you get an x that equals 7. So just like I said, the side that's opposite from A is going to turn out to just be 7. And then we can do all of our ratios. So the sine of A, opposite hypotenuse, would be 7/25. And the tangent of A, opposite over adjacent, would be 7/24. Then if you switch and start talking about angle B, sure, then your sine would be 24/25. And cosine, your adjacent, would be 7/25. And tangent of B would be opposite over adjacent, which is 24/7. But that's it. That's how you handle a problem like this, is you draw a triangle, use the numbers from whatever fraction they gave you to label two sides, and then use those two sides to find your third side. And once you have all three sides, you can do all the trig ratios pretty easily. Whoops, I left the calculator in the way. My apologies. There's all those answers. Okay, moving on. So number 2, part B is similar. This one's a little tougher, but we did this one in class. So some of you guys might even remember that we said that if you draw a right triangle, and if you let this side be B and this side be A, then they're telling you sine of B is 1/√2. Well, sine is opposite over hypotenuse, so the opposite side would be 1. The hypotenuse would be the square root of 2. If you do the Pythagorean theorem, that'll turn out that this side here is 1. So your two legs are 1 and 1, and the hypotenuse is √2. So that makes doing these trig ratios pretty easy. The cosine of B is just also going to be 1/√2. It's actually the same as sine in this problem. And the tangent of B would be 1/1, and 1 divided by 1 is just plain old 1. So give your answer as plain old 1. Then if you start doing sine of A, if you switch down here, well, your opposite side is still 1. So you're still just getting 1/√2 as your sine. And your adjacent side is still 1, so cosine is still 1/√2. Like, all these guys are just 1/√2. They all end up being the same thing. And then the tangent of A is going to be 1/1 again, and 1/1 is just 1. So this actually turns out to be a pretty boring problem where you just get the same thing kind of over and over. So now we're back to more trig problems, and this is just like the stuff from the page 134 homework. So if you need this practice, then great, I'll go through it, but I'm pretty sick of this. So if you need practice on these homeworks, I might ask that you just go watch the page 134 homework if you haven't yet, and they'll explain how to do these. I'm going to do these first two, and then probably nothing else. But again, the way we said to do these was mark your angle and then mark your sides. This 10.8 is opposite from the 57. And this x, of course, is the hypotenuse. And if I have those two sides, then I've got SOHCAHTOA. You have to make a choice whether you want to do this problem using sine or cosine or tangent. But think about it. All you've got is the opposite side and the hypotenuse. The only trig function that uses opposite and hypotenuse is sine. If you were going to do cosine, you would need to know the adjacent side, and we don't know the adjacent side. So cosine is not really an option, and neither is tangent, because tangent uses the adjacent side too. So we can see we really need to do this problem as a sine problem. So we write out sine of the angle, 57 degrees goes in the parentheses. We set that equal to the opposite side, which is 10.8, divided by the hypotenuse, which is x. So that's it. My equation is all set up. Now to solve it, we said to just put this side over 1, so we have a proportion, and cross multiply. You would do 1 times the 10.8, which is 10.8. And then set that equal to the sine of 57 times x, which is x times sine 57. So everybody remembers, I hope, that this is called the raised dot. It's raised up. It's not a decimal point. It's a raised up dot. It means multiplication. This little guy's a decimal point. That's not multiplication. All right, so how do I solve? Well, the way you get x alone is the same way you would always get x alone. If I'm multiplying, then I have to divide by whatever I'm multiplying by, because that's what would make it cancel out. But if you're going to divide this right-hand side, you have to divide the left-hand side too. So we finally end up with an answer where our x that is now all alone, our x is equal to 10.8 in the numerator divided by the sine of 57 in the denominator. But what the heck is the sine of 57? Again, if you have a fancy calculator, you can just hit the buttons, but if you don't, then you got to go back to your little sine chart. And if we want the sine of 57, then we look up and down for the correct angle, and 57 puts me here. And we said we wanted the sine, so sine is the first column right here. So that means the intersection of these two things is 0.8387. So I can take that decimal and plug it in. So we're going to divide by 0.8387. And if you do that division, you'll get your answer, whatever it is. I'll show you the calculator and we'll do it. So in our calculator, we decided we want to do 10.8 divided by whatever. Give me a second. We're doing 10.8 divided by, I cannot read that. Hold on. 0.8387. So we're going to divide by 0.8387. And I get 12.877 as my answer. And remember, I want you to round to 2 decimal places. So the fact that this 7 on the end is greater than 5 or greater, equal to 5 or greater, whatever, then we're going to round up. So instead of 12.87, we'll get 12.88. And that's our final answer for that problem. And we should do the next one. Okay, so for the next one, we obviously want to just do b. So let me get everything else out of the way. And our approach is going to be similar. The first thing I'm going to do is label my sides. And so I can see that x is opposite. The hypotenuse is blank, so this guy's adjacent. So this problem is all about opposite and adjacent, which means if SOHCAHTOA is being used, then we want to use the one that has O and A in it, and that's the one on the end, that's tangent. So for this problem, we're not using sine or cosine, we're using tangent. And we're going to take the tangent of that 32-degree angle. We're going to set it equal to x in the numerator, and our adjacent side in the denominator, so 13 downstairs. And I would put this over 1, I would cross multiply, 1 times x is x. And 13 times tangent of 32 is whatever the heck it is. And I don't know what it is. So I better go to my chart of trigonometric values. We're going to do 13 times whatever this decimal comes out to be. So tangent of 32, what's that? We'll go to your chart, find 32, that's going to be over here on the left side. 32 is right there. The tangent is this last column, so 0.6249. So it's 0.6249. So you just want to do 13 times 0.6249 and you get what you get. So click, here's my calculator, let me move it over there. Okay, and then just type in what you're going to get. So I'm doing 13 times 0.6249 and see what you get. So I'm getting 8.1237. My dog's going nuts in the background. Well, he was. He was digging on the bed. Lay down. Good boy. Alright, anyway. This is the last problem I'm doing, like I said, and I'm getting 8.12 as my answer. So x in this problem is 8.12. And that's it for trig. I can't do any more. It's too much. But you guys had a couple more. You had C and D. That's it. So I'll tell you what, I'll do them real fast just so you have the answers. Okay, I'm back. So here's those answers. For part C, you should have ended up with x equals 11 divided by the cosine of 37, which came out to 13.77. And same thing for part D. You should have ended up with x equals 4 divided by, this time tangent of 41, which gave you 4.60. But that's it for page 131. Yeah, there's no more after that. So that's the whole thing. If you watched all these videos, I don't think you could. It would have been a lot of time to watch it all. But hopefully you watched enough to get the gist of everything, and hopefully tomorrow you'll do really, really well. But I'll see you later. Good luck.